So I'm going to go ahead and get started for this evening's Coaches Corner, and actually the last of the year, because we will not have one in December. Of course, we're going to be very busy doing our FLL qualifiers in December. We will have one in January, but this will be our last Coaches Corner of the 2023 year. I always have to pause. What year is it again? It's only been 11 months of it. Again, my name is Louis Rubo. I am a team development and education specialist with First Nevada. And I'll be kind of the MC for tonight's Coaches Corner, if you will. With me is a number of First Nevada peeps who will be helping us monitor the chat. So as with all our Coaches Corner, if you have any questions as we're going along, please feel free to put them in the chat. There will be moments in the corner that I will pause and ask for questions, and you're more than welcome to unmute as well at that time. And we'll have time at the end of the presentation for you to ask more questions as well. So definitely come ready and let us know what's on your mind as I'm talking here. So with everything we've done this season, we do put it into an archive that is available to you on our Google Drive. So including these presentation notes, which are already posted, as well as our workshop slides and a number of other documents that we feel that would be useful. So it's the same link we've been using all year. You just follow that QR code there. It'll take you to our public resource folder, and then within that is subfolders, one of which is a Coaches Corner, as well as other folders that you may need throughout the season. So you don't have to take notes tonight, but you're welcome to come back and look at these notes later on. I do post more than just the slides. I post my annotated notes there, as well as a recording and the chat from the night, so you'll be able to go back and review anything that we discussed this evening. So the agenda for tonight is 3 parts, as we always do. What I want to do is very quickly just touch on some milestones, what you should be doing as a team here at the end of the season. Keeping in mind that some of you are competing in a few days, and the rest of you are competing in a week or two. So these milestones are really basically the wrap-up of the season. I want to spend a good amount of time talking about what the tournament actually looks like. So what will actually occur on the big day when your team comes out on that Saturday for our qualifying event. And then I want to end with just a kind of checklist of what your team should be thinking about as they pack up and get ready to come out to the big event. So as promised, let's start with just late season milestones. You do have a couple of days, maybe a week or two to catch up if needed. But this is kind of where your team should be, keeping in mind that, yeah, you are about to compete very shortly. So I'm going to stand on this soapbox once again and remind everyone that everybody, coaches and students, should have read the robot game rulebook. This is kind of the central document when it comes to everything in terms of the rules related to the robot game. And so it spills over into the robot design as well. Everyone should have a chance to have gone through this, in the case of the students, multiple times. So we want to make sure that everyone has a fun and fair experience when they get to the event. And that happens when you understand the rules. So you don't come into the event expecting one thing and being told that, no, that's not a legal way of building the robot, or you didn't score that mission in the proper way. If you go through the rule book, you're more than welcome to have a good conversation with our referees, but make sure you understand the rules ahead of time. So at this point in the season, everybody should have been exposed to this document, and the team members should have read through it multiple times and definitely be an expert on the missions they're solving and the general rules, which are found at the back of the document. Keep in mind as well is as the season progresses, first we'll release updates. These updates are official rulings, so everyone is expected to also know these as well. Thankfully, this year there are not too many updates, and they're somewhat obvious-ish. So, but make sure you've had the chance to go through. I put all of them are on the screen right now. It's really like just barely over 2 pages of updates with a lot of pictures. So there's not a lot of updates, but you still are responsible for going in and looking at this document and making sure you understand what those updates are. The last update was October 19th. So it's been pretty stable over the last month and a half-ish, give or take, that we've been going. But still, all the same, do make sure that you've looked these up and understand that they are official rules. So the referees will be using these as well in terms of scoring the teams. Of course, at this point in the season, your team should have a finished robot. And when I say finished, I pencil that statement in. You can definitely still be updating the robot and making modifications. As we'll talk about later. A good fraction of our team will progress on to a state championship, and you're welcome to continue making modifications to your robot. But definitely at this point, here we are at the end of November, very rapidly coming up on our competitions. You should have a built robot that can be programmed and move around. And again, referring to that robot game rulebook, it should satisfy all the rules in the rulebook. And there are rules about the robot size and what can be attached to it. So do make sure you go through and check that out. If you are in desperation mode, there are some quick builds you can follow. I do have the QR codes on there. We've used these same QR codes all season long. But definitely, if you need to just rapidly put together a robot, like the one in the top left there, that one can be built in less than an hour by a team. Even the one on the far left there, the advanced driving base that we've been using quite a bit this season, it too can be built by a team in a session, maybe two at most. But for the most part, you really should have a fully functioning robot ready to go. And your team members really should understand why they built that way and what they built exactly, because the judges will be asking about that. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a future slide. The other thing you should have accomplished by now is a handful of the missions. And I do want to stress this heavily to our teams. You are not expected to complete all of the missions on the Masterpiece Challenge. In fact, you don't even need to do half. Most of our teams, if you're doing 3 or 4 missions, you're pretty good. Your champions, I'm expecting to probably can do maybe half of them there. So definitely do not be stressing out if you cannot do all the missions, because at this point in the year, you really shouldn't. Even the eventual world champions is probably not going to be anywhere near this until late April when they compete at the World Championship. So for us, coming up on competing here in just a few weeks or a couple of days, really, if your team is solving 3 or 4 of these missions pretty reliably, you're in a really good place. If you're only doing 1 or 2, that's fine. Your team is still going to come out and have a lot of fun. And even at the tournament itself, they may be able to add on 1 more mission once they see the other teams going at it. But do understand, you do not have to do all the missions. You do not have to do them in any particular order. All you have to do is come out there with a robot that can go out and move. In fact, if you just leave the robot in the home base, you can score positive points. So do keep an understanding of that in mind as well. But I do want to stress overall, your team, if it really has a robot that can go out there and solve just a handful of missions, you're ready to go for these upcoming events. So, keep your head up and smile. The kids are going to have a blast no matter what mission they can solve. It's so much fun. But all the same, I do want to go back and stress that idea that make sure you understand the robot game rulebook, because we do see this a lot where a team will show up to an event expecting to be scored one way and finding out that it was not a legal way to score, or maybe the robot isn't functioning the way it was supposed to or allowed to. So do make sure you understand those rules before you get to the event on that Saturday of your competition. And then I see Scott there. Okay, we'll come back to that in a break, but that's a good point, Scott. The other thing you should be thinking about as a team, as a milestone here, is you should be finalizing your innovation project presentation. Remember, your team is going to have to present for 5 minutes uninterrupted about their innovation project. So as a coach, what you might be doing right now is asking your team questions and giving them mock interviews. And so you might be just outright asking your team things like, what problem did they identify? What was the innovative solution that they came up with? How did they develop that solution? And who did they share it with? And what kind of feedback did they use to improve on their innovative solution? So these are the sort of questions you really want to be prepping your team members with, so they can start thinking about how they might answer that. Or more importantly, you should be working on your finalization of your presentation itself that incorporates the answers to these questions in there. Because as we'll talk about in a moment, the judging rubrics are going to go after these sort of questions. So do keep in mind that every team is allotted 5 minutes of uninterrupted time in which they get to fully present their innovation project to the judges. And as we talked about in the Innovation Project Coaches Clinic earlier this year, you really have an open-ended leeway to figure out how you want to make that presentation. It might be just a straightforward presentation. It might be a skit. It might be a play. It might be a musical or whatever you want to come up with. Your team has that ability to choose how it wants to present, but it has a very strict 5 minutes to do that. And so a lot of teams at this moment in the season are trying not so much to figure out what they're going to present, is how they're going to fit it within 5 minutes. And do keep that in mind. It is a pretty strict 5-minute rule, so you do need to pare it down there. In addition to the innovation project presentation, there's also the robot design presentation. So each team is given 5 minutes to discuss their robot with the judges. And you're doing this discussion away from the robot game mat. So you're doing it in a room that does not include the mission models. So the team really has to figure out a good way to describe the engineering of their robot and the programming of it. So the sort of questions you might be working with on your team right now is, how did the team come up with this design? And if you did use the advanced driving base, that's okay, but explain what motivated you to go with that design. What is unique or innovative about your team's robot, right? You want to leave some lasting impression on the judges who, after interviewing multiple teams, is going to be able to go into a judge deliberation room and say, you know what? That one team wearing the all blue shirts, they had this amazing little attachment that was able to accomplish this or that. And so your team might be thinking about what is unique and innovative about their robot. Make sure they understand what missions they can accomplish and at what success rate. Judges love to ask the question, oh, you can do mission 3, that's great. How often does your team actually score that mission? And make sure that the kids, who tend to be very honest, make sure that they understand how your team measured that success rate as well. And don't forget that as part of the robot design judging, they're going to ask about the code. And so the judges are going to be interested in any nifty tricks you're using. They want to see if your code has been commented. They want to know who was the programmer on the team. Was it delegated out? Did everybody get involved? These are the sort of questions that's going to happen during a robot design. Now, I will say, unlike the innovation project, which a lot of teams tend to put on a very cute or kind of interesting or fun, entertaining presentation, you don't necessarily need to do that with the robot design. It's much more of a kind of, I don't want to use the word formal, but it's much more of a straightforward engineering presentation. So you are giving them kind of the nuts and bolts of the robot and the programming side of things. So do keep that in mind. You don't need to put together a skit with, costumes and rolling sets or anything like that. You really just, you want to maximize that 5 minutes to discuss the robot itself and all of its engineering associated with it. You do get that uninterrupted time. If your team cannot fill the 5 minutes, then the judges will just start in on their discussion with the team there. But again, this is something you should be working on here late in the season, is kind of polishing up that presentation. So that is kind of the late season milestones as we enter the event itself. What questions do you have? And I did see Scott put in there, can you have 2 or more robots? And his answer right there is dead on, right? Your team is more than welcome to have more than 1 robot. However, when you come up to the robot game table, you're only allowed to have 1 hub going. And so just keep that in mind. If you do employ multiple robots, do make sure to take all the robots to robot design judging and let the judges know why your team use multiple robots. And there could be all kinds of reasons you do that. One might be a prototype robot. One might be, you're just going to swap it out as a backup robot. It might be that a certain set of kids used 1 robot and another set used a different robot. Let the judges know that, because that can touch on things like inclusivity, and it can do, different innovation ideas. So, but do understand that during a match, you can only bring 1 robot up to the table. Yeah. Good. Any other questions here? Good. Any other questions about milestones? Regarding the audience, can we build a model? I don't understand that question there. What would be the destination area? Are you talking like at the tournament, or are you talking about on the field? Oh, audience and orangement. Oh, okay. Yeah, so and do keep in mind you're allowed to have different attachments to your robot that you can swap out when the robot is in on home. So if you want to use a certain particular attachment that will deliver your orange person out on the field and then swap it out in between runs, you can do that as long as you're operating with the robot in the home area. Just make sure that the students are not interacting with the robot outside of the launch area where you can get a penalty. Yep. And then I'll just jump it in there. Yep. And Phil, I'm going to actually talk about that one right now. So let's talk about what does a tournament day actually look like. First off, it is an all-day event, and depending on the number of teams, will dictate kind of exactly when you'll get out. But do expect to be there early in the morning on Saturday, and then leaving late afternoon on the Saturday that day. Thankfully, it's the same Saturday. You don't have to go a full week, so it's not that long. All right, so you'll start early in the morning. Team check-ins at 7:30, and you really do need to be there at that time. And the reason is the first thing on our schedule is an 8 o'clock coaches meeting, and that is a really important meeting. It's the time for the tournament director to go over last second logistics that are related to the venue, to make sure there's any updates we need to share with you or any changes. It is also our opportunity to walk you through how you're going to get the judging, how you're going to queue up for both judging and the robot game. So the coaches meeting is really important, and that happens at 8 o'clock sharp. We really do squeeze it in a half an hour in the morning there. So yes, the team everybody on the team needs to be there during that team check-in period from 7:30 to 8. The expectation is you do have kind of two coaches. At least one coach is going to coaches meeting. The second coach is in the pit, kind of setting up the pit, helping the team get ready for the day. If you don't have a second coach, do look to have a adult parent maybe of the team sitting with the kids during that time. The coaches meeting is a coach only meeting. We ask that the students do not join us. Where the coaches meeting will happen is venue specific. I know in the South we tend to have it in the robot game area, but that's not necessarily going to be the location in all the places. So we'll let you know at check-in where you'll be. During check-in, I do want to say you will be responsible for turning in your team roster at that time, and you'll get your team individualized schedule at that time as well. And so that's when you'll really find out exactly where you'll be throughout the day. Immediately following the coaches meeting, is we'll start in on our practice matches. So every team is allotted one scheduled practice match. Also, we will start in on judging. And the way the schedule works is you will not have to be at two places at once. The scheduling software does make sure that you have some buffer between the time you're at the table versus the time you need to be in judging. Do you expect your judging will be at least 30 minutes? Well, it will be 30 minutes long. So you will have a chunk of time in the morning or early afternoon for judging. So we'll have our practice matches and judging starting up at 8:30, and then they will go up until 10. At what point we will have a tournament-wide opening ceremony. So nobody will be doing any matches during that time, and nobody's in judging at that time. And so we'll have those opening ceremonies for everyone. This is our chance to kind of say hello, get you pumped up for you'll get pumped up for the rest of the tournament. We'll make any last second announcements that pertains to everybody as an entire audience, including all the teams. And then after that opening ceremony, we go right back into more judging. And that's the start of round one of our official robot game matches. And that will take us up to a tournament-wide lunch break. So everyone will have a lunch break at the same time. This will allow our volunteers as well to eat lunch, catch their breath as well before we come back for the afternoon. The afternoon we'll start off. We'll have round two of our robot game matches, and a few teams will go through their judging in the early afternoon. And then round three of the robot game matches, really that's the only thing that's happening at that time in the tournament. So this is an opportunity for everybody to come together in the main area, watch that last round of the robot game matches together, and really enjoy the end of the day there coming together. Now, I purposely left a little gap at the bottom there between the last of the official matches and the closing ceremonies. And that is because our judges need time to incorporate all of the robot game scores and to do the last bit of deliberation to finalize the awards. And so we always will have a little bit of downtime. It'll be short. Usually we try to keep it, 20, 30 minutes at most, which we try to, have fun and different activities. We'll have a little dance off maybe, or some little games or whatever that will keep you entertained. It's also an opportunity for your team to clean up their pits as well. So as we prepare for the closing ceremonies. And then, of course, we'll finish out the day with the closing ceremony. Again, I can't give you an exact time because it does depend on which event you're going to and how many teams are participating in those events. But we can give you a rough schedule, and you should have received a info packet giving you kind of an outline for your particular event of what these teams are roughly going to look like, what these times are roughly going to look like. But in general, this is how all of our tournaments look like here in Nevada. So kind of you'll get this kind of structure going all the way through. So with the robot game, of course, this is the biggest visual part of First Lego League. It's not the only part, but it's kind of the part that everybody sees. This is the thing, of course, your team has been working on in terms of building a robot, programming it to solve the masterpiece missions. During our events, what will happen is your team will have the opportunity to do one practice match on the official tables. That's how we start the morning off. And then in the late morning, you'll have one official round. And then in the afternoon, you'll have two more official rounds. So overall, your team will have four scored rounds. The first one is practice and will have no meaning towards your overall ranking. It's just an opportunity for your team to work at the official tables, to interact with the referees, ask them questions, to see the process in motion. But then you'll have three official scored rounds. Your top score and only your top score will be used to rank you. So we don't use an average, and we don't use anything in terms of where we combine all three scores in any way. We just take your best score out of the three runs, and that's what we use to rank the teams. Your best run might be the first match, the first non-practice match. It may be the second or the third one. Whichever one it is, that's the one we use. The second and third best scores we only use as tiebreakers, and it's a pretty rare event that happens. So really just do your best, forget the rest, and just kind of go from there. Do keep in mind that what's going to happen is after your 2.5-minute match, your team will have the opportunity to interact with the referees. The referees will go through the scoring of each mission and have a nice conversation with the team members, and they'll discuss how and why they got scored. This is an opportunity for your team to ask questions if they don't feel that they were scored properly. Again, if they've read that robot game rule book, they know those rules. They can ask, well, could you clarify why we were scored that way? And if there is any questions, then what we do is we bring over a head referee, and the head referee will make the final call for that scoring. But it is an opportunity for your students to really kind of take their voice and make sure they use their knowledge of the game to ask questions with the referees. So they do check off before they get that finalized score. Once they leave the table, though, that score is final. We don't allow videotaping from parents or photographs to update the score. It really has to be finished up while the team is at the table. Our referees are off limits. We do like to keep them focused on the game. If you end up having any sort of questions, that's where I will discuss it with the tournament director, who is running the coaches meeting at the beginning of the day. So you'll be introduced to them right away. Besides the robot game, of course, there are three other components. Now, I just talked about the robot game. That actually only represents 25% of what your team is being measured on during the day. And of course, it is the big visual one because it usually happens in the gym with their parents or family and friends all hanging out watching. But again, that's only 25% of what your team is being measured on. Besides the robot game, the other thing is they're going to go into a judging session, and they're going to explain to judges their robot design. And this is where they explain the engineering, why they built the robot the way they did, why they made the attachment a certain way, what is unique, what is cool about it. They'll also have an opportunity to explain the programming. So it's a good idea to bring a copy of your, a hard copy, I should say, of your code in there to show the judges so they can get a feel for what the coding looks like as well. In addition to robot design, of course, this is going to be your opportunity to tell the judges about your innovation project. So you're going to have a nice discussion with them, and they're going to find out what your team studied, what was their innovative solution, what kind of people did they share it with. So they're going to have a nice little dialogue with the team about what exactly was their innovation project. And the last quarter of what our teams are measured on is their fundamentals, their core values, the first principles that we kind of build all of our programs off of, which of course are discovery, impact, teamwork, innovation, inclusion, and fun. So during their judging session, they will be kind of measured on this, as well at the robot game. So at the robot game, the referees will mark a little mark on their score sheet, kind of indicating how their core values were demonstrated on site. So do keep in mind that your team wants to be balanced in all 4 areas, and all 4 areas are equally weighted in our minds. So when we do deliberate in terms of our awards, we do take all 4 categories into consideration. Each of them is given 25% weight. So if your team comes in there and they just smash that robot game, but really didn't have an innovation project, it's going to hurt them pretty bad. And we do get this question every year. One of our top scoring teams in the robot game asks, well, why didn't we get advanced onto the state championship? Well, it's because those other 3 areas they weren't very strong in, right? So you do need to be a balanced team if you want to progress on to our state championship. We want to see that innovation project, the robot design, and we absolutely want to see the core values being demonstrated throughout the tournament, not just in the judging room and not just at the robot game table. So when you do go into judging, teams will be allocated 30 minutes. During that 30-minute session, they will have a discussion with a panel of adult judges. Every judging session follows the exact same format. That way, we're making sure every team is given their due process of getting through the judging, and they're given a fair opportunity to share their achievements from the season. So what will happen is the team will be invited into the judging room at a very specific time. And make sure your team is there at least 5, if not 10 minutes early. And I think we'll discuss that more during our coaches meeting about exactly what time we want you there. But your team will then be invited into the judging room. There'll be a couple minutes of introductions between the judges and the team itself. And then the very first thing you do is you spend 10 minutes discussing the innovation project. The first 5 minutes of that time is your team presenting uninterrupted to the judges. So they have their 5 minutes on the stage, if you will, not figuratively, because a lot of times we're just in the classroom. But you have 5 minutes of clear time to just tell the judges your innovation project. And that is followed up with 5 minutes of questions from the judges. So 10 minutes total. And it's kind of a bummer. I say this every year. You spend months and months working on this innovation project, and it all comes down to a 5-minute presentation and 5 minutes of Q&A time. So when you're thinking about that presentation and preparing the team, just keep that in mind. You have a very limited time to share a whole season's worth of information and activities. It can be done though. The next 10 minutes is going to be kind of the same thing, but instead of innovation project, it's going to be robot design. So, and again, what we're going to do is dive into what exactly is your robot? How did it get made? What was the design principles behind it? What are the kind of iterative improvements did you make? How did you program it? Those are the sort of things that will happen during your robot design. Again, your team will be allocated 5 minutes to share with the judges whatever they like. And then the judges will have 5 minutes of question and answer time. If your team can't fill 5 minutes, that's okay. The judges will just dive into a longer Q&A time. But the judges will only spend about 10 minutes on that robot design part. Again, your team has been working with the robot all season long. There's been many hours of frustrations and celebrations associated with that robot, but it's really going to come down to just 10 minutes of sharing. Then what will happen is there will be 3 minutes of the core values reflection. You really don't need to overly prepare for this. It's usually just a dialogue between the judges and the team members. You might want to prep them on an elevator pitch about the core values and how your team demonstrated them or incorporated them throughout the season. But really, this is going to be just kind of a casual conversation that happens between the judges and the team members. But do make sure your team understands what the core values are and how they exemplified those core values throughout the season. So think about how those 6 core values were used maybe in the robot game, maybe in the innovation project, or just in general. How do they employ them throughout their year? And then the last bit is the judge. Whoop, I went too far. The last bit is the judges will give some in-person feedback to the team, kind of give them some pointers there, and definitely, congratulate them on a long but successful season. So that's how the session will end. The team will then be asked to leave the room, and the judges then will fill out the rubrics and by themselves without the students present. Do keep in mind that the judging rubrics are not a secret. They are publicly available, and your team definitely should have reviewed them by now. If not, definitely look over them. So you know exactly what the judges are looking for in every area. And we've talked about these a number of times this season. Look over them and make sure you're starting to prep your team members to answer these questions, incorporate them into your presentation, because this is what the judges are looking for. Your team might come in with just the cutest costumes in the world and the biggest smiles on their faces, but if you look on here, that's not exactly what we're measuring, right? We want to hear about the iterative design and the innovation project. We want to see and hear about how the teamwork was employed. We want to know, how did your team communicate their key ideas, both in the robot design and innovation project? So do take the time, read through these rubrics carefully. Each year they get tweaked a little bit. So if you were a veteran team, do make sure you've gone back and looked at them. Sometimes some wording gets changed on here. But do take a look at them before you get to the event so you have an idea of how to prep your team for the judging process. Now, our goal is to do all of these rubrics electronically. And so you should have access to them within a few days following the event. So you will get the feedback back to your team. This will be particularly important for the teams progressing on to our state championship. But for everybody, I'm sure you'll be interested in hearing about the judges' feedback. In fact, the bottom of every rubric has two areas, kind of open-ended questions for our judges, where they give the teams a kind of a great job notification of like, this is what really stuck out about your team. And then there's a think about comment about, you know what, you might want to think about making these improvements or these changes if you want to progress on or use these ideas in the future. All very helpful information in there. One thing I do want to say on these rubrics, the 4 level, the exceeds level, is really hard to get at, especially at the qualifying level. The exceeds are really left for those very rare circumstances when you show the judges something they never even thought they would see. And so a lot of your scores are probably going to be in 3, maybe the 2 area, with 1 or 2 4s. They are very hard to get. And so don't be discouraged if you don't see a lot of 4s or even any, because they are reserved for the most wow moments in all of judging. So if you're definitely coming back with all 3s, man, that's an outstanding job. So do keep that in mind. All right, I think Leilani left, but I always want to make this little plug for her. And I mean, if you want to improve as a coach, my number 1 tip to you is judge at an event that your team is not participating in. So we have, over the next 3 weekends, qualifiers happening throughout the state. I would strongly suggest that you judge at an event at which your team is not participating. It will give you so much insight into the entire process. It'll give you ideas, and more than anything, it'll probably help relax you in terms of like, are we prepared? When you start seeing all the other teams, you realize, oh, wow, we're right with these teams. Judging is an outstanding way to not only give back to the wonderful program, but it really does give you a new sense of what's expected and an understanding of the entire process. We are definitely always looking for judges. This weekend, especially in the north, if you're not competing this weekend up in the Sparks area, I highly suggest you come out to judge and come out and help us. In the south, we're actually, this particular weekend, hopefully Leilani has signed off. This weekend we are full in the south, but that doesn't mean we can't use help on the other 2 events. So do come out and help us judge. And again, it is such a rewarding process, not only for a great program, but as a coach, you're going to get so much insight into what it's like on our side of the fence. So if you're interested, what you do is you sign into your dashboard on the First Inspires website. And instead of going into the team section, there's a volunteer tab. you go into the volunteer tab, and it'll walk you through the process of finding an event near you. And we would love to have you come out. And judging isn't the only thing. If you're interested in the robot game, we can use referees, or if maybe you only have a part a day available, we've got a job for you. So definitely come out and help us out if you have some free time to kind of get a feel and understanding of more about First Lego League. Okay, so that was my little slide plug. Back into what the tournament's like. So our day ends, all of our days end with a award ceremony. So we have a closing ceremony where what we do is we recognize the achievements of our team. We recognize that this has been a long season. It's been many months in the making. Your team has gone through a lot of ups and downs, but this one-day celebration here is really an opportunity for you to showcase what your team has worked on, to share with others, and to really kind of sit back and say, wow, that was really awesome. I love this program. We'll have a closing ceremony, which will include awards presentations. What we'll hear is you'll get awards, and I'll walk through the awards here in a moment. But we'll get our awards. Teams will go through our high five line. They'll receive their trophies and their medals as well. All of the fun experience there. So definitely make sure to plan to go through the entire day and help celebrate not only your team's achievements, but the achievements of the other teams around you. So here are the awards that we will be handing out. There's a standard set of awards we do at all of our events. The most prestigious award, of course, is the Champions Award. And the champion, the one that kind of really excels at the tournament, is a team that is balanced in all four of those areas we discussed. You're not going to get the Champions Award necessarily if you get the highest robot game score. You can, but to do so, you have to be balanced in the innovation project, in the robot design, and the core values. So being the top scoring team doesn't necessarily mean you get the Champions Award. It is the team that is the most balanced across all four core areas. And so it does recognize that team that really embraces all parts of the First Lego League program. And do keep that in mind as you're working towards it. It's actually the last award, of course, we announce. Then we have what we call our core judging areas. Those are the core values, innovation project, and robot design awards. The way teams are measured on these is we do use the judging rubrics that I discussed earlier tonight. Is the teams will be ranked based on how they are evaluated on those. The judges will deliberate. They'll have conversations. They'll compare notes on the judging process. So they're going to use those rubrics to identify teams that receive core values, innovation project, and robot design awards. There's another set of awards over here on the right, the Engineering Excellence, the Breakthrough, Rising All-Star, and Motivate Awards. These ones don't necessarily have a direct rubric, but they are identified through how the team judges in that judging session. So they might come in and maybe they're kind of weaker in some areas, but man, they really blew the judges away in some other area, or they might have a unique story or something that really sticks them out for these awards. So these particular ones, there isn't necessarily a rubric you'll work towards. The judges uses internal criteria that you can read. And so, for example, in the Breakthrough Award, it says this award celebrates a team that made significant progress in their confidence and capabilities in both the robot game and innovation project, and are shining examples of core values. So again, this is something that the judge will look for as they are kind of talking with the teams. It's not something that comes through on a rubric necessarily, but they're going to listen to your stories. They're going to listen to your interactions with the community. They're going to listen to the challenges you've overcame, and they're going to identify teams for these awards. The Robot Performance Award, that one's pretty straightforward. That's the one where we're out in the gyms. We're watching the robots score the missions on the Masterpiece mat. They get scored from the referees using standardized score sheets. Those scores are published as fast as we can get them up, and you can see your ranking. So these ones you can see throughout the day as they go up, and they are just scored, and the top performing teams at the robot game will win the Robot Performance Award. And that, again, comes back to we take your top robot game match, we use that to rank all the teams in the tournament, and the top performing teams will receive an award. And of course, we recognize you, those adult coaches and mentors who spend so much time working with their team members. And what we do is we hand out a Coach Mentor Award. And those are awarded through nominations that come from your team. So your team will receive a little nomination form that needs to be turned in by about the halfway point in the event. And then what we'll do is we go through those as judges and we identify a top performing coach or mentor based on those nomination forms, and we recognize you during those closing ceremonies. So again, these are all the awards that we hand out to the events. Our aim is about 30 to 50%. It varies. About 30 to 50% of our teams do receive an award, but not everybody does because we still want to celebrate the achievements and the hard working of those teams who work towards those goals. One thing I do want to stress is, of course, the first core values. I've already mentioned them once this evening. They are discovery, innovation, impact, teamwork, inclusion, and fun. These are the foundation of everything we do in FIRST, and we do want to make sure that they're on show the entire tournament. And an important part of this is the core values apply not only to our young youth members, they apply to coaches and they apply to family members. So if we hear arguing in the stands, or we have disagreements, or we have a unruly coach, it will knock your team down in terms of their judged awards. It's not just what the kids do, it's what everybody does. So make sure you pass that along to your family, your friends, your spectators, that the first core values applies to everybody who is on site. We want to see this from everybody. Likewise, we expect of our volunteers that are helping out. And so if you do feel that there are some issues with your volunteers, do let us know. We do talk to them and make sure they're expressing their core values appropriately as well. The whole idea is this is really supposed to be a celebration, a fun day where we get together and look back on a season with smiles. So we do want to make sure everyone is following those core values along the way. One last bit in this section. What happens next? Well, we have our qualifiers over the next 3 weekends. We have them spread throughout the state. Of course, in the north, we'll be in Sparks, Elko, and Carson City over the next few weekends. And then in the south, we'll be at Las Vegas, Las Vegas, Las Vegas, over and over throughout the different parts of the valley. About 30% of our teams are going to progress on to a state championship. In the north, it's going to be 24 teams in total. In the south, it's going to be 36 teams. The discrepancy there is because there are just more teams in the south. So approximately 30% of our teams are going to come out of our qualifying events in December and be invited to a championship event in January. We'll have 2 of them at the same time, one up in Reno and one down here in Las Vegas. Those events will just be a redo, if you will, of our qualifiers. Nothing carries over. So no matter what award you did or did not receive at the qualifiers, or no matter what you scored or what the judges said, all of that's forgotten. And for our teams that go on to the championship event, we just start with a fresh slate and we reevaluate you from scratch, basically running the identical style tournament all over again. So everything will be the same. We will talk about in the January Coaches Corner more specifics related to those events. But for now, just keep in mind, really the championship events are for those 30 or so % of the teams that progress on and they move on to the championships. Now, the teams that move on are teams that are balanced. And again, I want to emphasize this. Just because you win the robot game doesn't mean your team is necessarily going to move on to a championship event. We are looking for the most balanced teams. We want to make sure everyone's expressing those core values in a positive way. We want to make sure your teams have an innovation project. We want to make sure you understand your robot design. We want to have a balance there. So the top 30% of the performing teams are all going to be balanced. So even if you see your team at the top of the robot game, that isn't a guarantee you're moving on to the championship. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now in January, during Coaches Corner, we'll talk more about this third level. But for now, I'll just dangle this carrot out there that we have been invited to participate in 4 different events, what we call tertiary events, third level events. We have an invitation to the first World Championship, which we call the World Festival for First Lego League. That's in Houston in April. Our champion from the North will get that bid this year. Every time we get a bid from Nevada, we swap between North and South. The last time we were at the World Championship, the Southern champion got the invite. This year's the North's turn. We also have invitations to California, Florida, and Massachusetts. In fact, we have 2 invites to Massachusetts. So we are going to be sending 5 of our teams onto a 3rd level event. Just keep that in mind. So it's kind of a carrot of what we're competing for down the road. I'll talk much more about those in our January Coaches Corner as we prepare for those regional championships. But this kind of gives you a map of what's coming up in the next few months. All right, that's a lot, but of course that's what we're here for today. Before I talk about a tournament checklist, are there any questions? Let's see. I'm going to just peek through the chat. Is there anything here I need to go back to and update?
I think so, Rubo. I would just follow up on Angela's comment and say, in the South, it sounds like you guys have all the volunteers, but just don't take that as a broad statement. We still do need volunteers up in the North for all 3 events, and I think in the South for the December 9th and December 16th events. So always need volunteers.
And yeah, for this Saturday, we're okay. But if everyone stops coming, then we're not okay. So if you're coming out in the South, do make sure you're still coming out. Yep. Yeah. Don't want to show up on Saturday morning like, where is everybody? Yeah, and it's said the head referee's ruling is final. Angelo rubric. Yep, Angelo. Yep. And I think we're good. So in the last few minutes here, what I want to do is just kind of give you a reminder list of what you can and cannot bring to the events in terms of what you'll need there. First and foremost, what we need to see is at check-in, and really has to be first thing in the morning, we need an official roster that you printed off from the first team dashboard. So we've discussed this before in a prior Coaches Corner. You should have been adding your student members to your team already. This shows us that their parent and a legal guardian has completed their consent and release form for them. This also makes sure that you as a coach have gone through the YPP screening and everything. And what we'll do is we collect these rosters up at the start of the day. So don't expect to come in and print them. We don't have a printer available for you. You have to bring them in, and we need a hard copy. We can't just look at your phone screen to see this. A couple of quick caveats about this is, one is if your team does progress on to the championship, you will need to reprint this roster and bring it to the championship event. We don't move it forward throughout the season. We will ask you for a new roster at the championship. Also, we've got this question a couple of times, so I want to share. We do have age limits for the program. The upper limit is a hard cutoff. So that 14-year-old limit is a hard cutoff for First Lego League. The lower age limit, that 9-year-old, we're a little bit more looser on. That's good. We really do leave it up to you as a coach if you feel that the student is mature enough to be a positive contribution to your team. The shortcoming here is that the first system doesn't allow you to add a student younger than the lower age cutoff through the electronic system. And so what we need to do instead is you'll have to fill out a paper form and bring that in with you ahead of time. And so do let us know if that's the case with you. If you do have a child who is too young to enter in on the electronic system, we do have a workaround there. This should be a rare case. Most of our team members are in that age limit, but a few of our team members are slightly below that cutoff, the lower age limit. You're still welcome. They're welcome to be a part of the team. And we just, to get them on the roster, we have to do a paper form. And so just reach out to us and let us know. Other thing you got to bring to the event, well, here, make sure to bring that robot. I actually haven't ever seen a team forget the robot outright, but I have seen them forget the peripherals to the robot. Don't forget the plug to charge it. It is a long day. That robot is going to wear down. Do make sure to bring a charging plug for it. Also, make sure to bring spare parts. You know, if you need to swap anything out, make sure you have a sturdy container for it. Some teams elect to bring their laptop with them. That is your choice. Do keep in mind that no programming device, no Bluetooth device that can control the robot is allowed near the robot game table. You can have it near the practice table, but not at the robot game table. all the missions, all the programs have to be pre-stored on the robot. So if you do bring a laptop, you can use it in the pit area. You can use it over in the practice tables, but it cannot be in the robot game area. Other thing is, of course, I do want to remind you that the kids are meant to be doing the work. So we do not want to see coaches building or programming that robot during the day. It's really all about the kids doing the work. And it's really the principle all season long, but especially at the event. We don't want some adult over there building that robot or programming it, making improvements to it. It's really the kids' day to shine. It really is the whole season is. So just keep that in mind as we're going on. Of course, with the innovation project and robot design, don't forget all your presentation materials. So a lot of our teams like to use props to express their innovation project. Make sure you bring those props with you. Robot design, same way. Some teams like to put together a little poster board or maybe a notebook showing their programs, maybe some pictures or whatever. Don't forget it. And also, I want to remind everyone, your judging session incorporates all three areas: the innovation project, the robot design, and core values. So all of that judging material, you want to be able to move from the pits to the judging session. So you may want to bring a wagon with you. Make sure you've got enough hands to carry all that materials with you to get them from your pit to the judging area. Some of our venues is quite a distance. Some various might be a little bit shorter, but do keep in mind if you are bringing those larger items that you have a way to transport them over. We won't necessarily have anything to help you with. It's really on the teams to get them to those locations. But don't forget all of your props that your team wants to share about their innovation project, the robot design, their core values. Every team has gotten a space allocated to them called the pit or the team's pit. Makes it sound kind of negative, but it's not meant to be that way. It's like NASCAR pits. But you have an opportunity here to express your team. So you might want to think about bringing some pit decorations to kind of share with everybody. You might want to bring a little bit of swag that you can hand out. So maybe like little rubber wrist bracelets or erasers or pencils. We do ask that you not hand out any stickers because they tend to end up on the floor and it's a real pain to get them off. But if your team wants to hand out anything, you're welcome to do that. If you want to have a little game, that your team wants to share with people, if you have a little presentation, trifolds that you want to share your innovation project, your robot design with, your pit is your opportunity to do that. Your pit is really your landing zone. Really thinking of like NASCAR, it's your place for your team to call home during the event. We do ask though that you're very mindful of your pit in terms of making sure everything looks clean, picked up. Ideally, everything is stored underneath the table or in a designated area. We would prefer that most people are watching the robot game in the main gym. Your pit area is kind of just your storage locker, if you will, your place to kind of gather, maybe eat lunch at. If it's nice, you could probably go outside. But do keep your pits kind of clean. They do get crowded and they become sometimes a tripping hazard. So I just want to mention that to everyone. But it is a great opportunity for you to share what you accomplished as a team this season. So you might think of ways to decorate your pit. I can't tell you ahead of time necessarily what your table will look like. I will say a lot of times it's cafeteria style tables we use. Sometimes it's 6-foot tables. Sometimes it's round tables. Sometimes it's rectangular tables. I'm sorry I can't be more specific, but it does depend on the venue. But you still might want to think about something to bring to help decorate up your pit a bit. One thing we ask you do not bring your challenge mat and the missions. We will have practice tables for you available. So you will have the opportunity to have practice. Not only, I talked about the practice matches. Those are on the official game tables. We have a separate set of robot practice tables available to you. We ask that you don't bring in your own challenge mat from home. And the main reason is our pits tend to get very crowded. We don't have space for them and they become a tripping hazard. And it really is, it's not easy to maintain that space. And so please just leave them at home. In fact, if we see you bringing them in at check-in, we're just going to ask you, hey, could you turn around and just go put that in your car for the day? Do keep that in mind. We do have that practice tables available to you. I know you might think, well, we could just bring our own. It really, it becomes a safety issue, really, and it's just a space concern. So please just leave those at home, and we'll provide what you need there. The last thing I want to remind you to bring, of course, is your team spirit. This is a day to celebrate everything you've done and accomplished through the season. It's been a long season. We understand that, and we're here is to have fun with you. A lot of high fives, a lot of good smiles, some goofiness. Kids are going to interact. The coaches are going to interact. You're going to see each other. This is an opportunity just to have fun and let loose a little bit. We do call this a sport for the mind. We treat it like a sporting area. You're encouraged to cheer your teams on. Have a little cheer. Have signs in the crowds. Have signs next to the robot game tables. Have you those nice, cute costumes expressing your team. We want to see all that. This is your day to come together and really just celebrate the achievement of these kids. And so do keep in mind that, as I said, this is the extra. It's not a requirement. We understand that every team has different financial support. So, you're not required to do this, but, bring out a smile. That's what we really want to see. We want to see the teams cheering each other on. We want to see that support from our parents, our family members. They're welcome to come out as well. All of our events are free and open to the public. They're welcome to come out and watch the robot game. We just kind of keep the judging area off limits. So, and with that, I'm going to end. And I'm going to open up the floor. We almost do this all the time here, but open up the floor for questions.
Hey, Rubo, I was just starting to type an answer, but maybe it's better if you answer it in words. And I apologize too, because I've been multitasking, so maybe it was covered. But Stacy asked a good question with regards to the judging sessions and whether or not parents are allowed. And so maybe that's a good time to, even if you said it, maybe reiterate what we allow and don't allow in terms of.
So, Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we allow the 2 coaches in there, and that is it. And I think that was what we did last year. And I'm not sure if we finally, it's the 2 coaches and the team members. And the only people who are ever allowed to speak in the judging room are the judges and the kids. Anybody additional in the room has to stay completely silent. And because we really want the kids to lead that presentation discussion. But if anybody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're allowing just the 2 coaches.
Yeah, I just add on to that, Rubo. I think, one of the reasons for that, one, it can get very crowded. We can't always control the size of the room. And then it becomes like which parents get to go in, and that seems somewhat unfair because we can't necessarily fit everyone. Also, it can distract from the kids, with all that going on. Just follow-up question there I saw about the videotaping, so I was leading to that. So I think one of the ideas is that if a coach is in the room, they can videotape it, and then they can share that with the parents later. And we just ask the coaches, to be, quiet. Basically, you're ghosts. You're kind of in the room, but you shouldn't say anything. You shouldn't make any noises or hand gestures. And if you're wherever you stand, whether you're recording or not, you should not be behind the judges. You shouldn't be looking over their shoulder or what they're writing on a piece of paper, or the notes they're taking. So you need to find a place in the room where you can be out of the way of the kids. You can be out of the way of the judges. Typically, that's going to probably be on the left or right side because usually the kids and the judges are facing each other. So, pick a side basically and be out of the way and be quiet and film. And again, you can record, and then again, you can share that with the parents. We know the parents want to see what the kids are doing, but just please try to understand, again, space is limited, and we also want to make sure the judges feel comfortable doing their job and not feel like they're being, monitored or watched while they're trying to do a very important and difficult job.
Yeah. And to reiterate what Scott's saying, one of the things we usually do with our judges is we have an allocated space in their room. Every venue is different, so I can't tell you it's going to be right here or there. But yeah, it is always so the judges can kind of keep an eye on the parents as well to make sure there's not getting any cues or anything in there. Yeah. Or I shouldn't say parents, the coaches. Yeah. Good questions. And do keep in mind, as with all things, including judging and robot game, all the videoing and all of that is for your team's archive purposes. It cannot be used to clarify or rescore anything. So it's something for you to view after the event, if you will, or to share with parents or whatnot. You cannot bring it up to the judge advisor or the referee to ask them to rescore something. It's just for your team to kind of use for future purposes. Good, not judging. Yeah, and that good, Jenny. We're not judging the pit decor. There's no award for it. It's just a fun way to kind of really kind of bring out the end of the season, make it kind of a sporting event. Yeah. And then all the judging is 100% done in those 30 minutes during that presentation. Yeah. Good. Well, we are at 8 o'clock. As always, I will stick on here and continue answering questions. You're welcome to unmute yourself, throw more questions in the chat. Just let us know. Otherwise, I can't wait to see everyone at a future event. Hopefully, also as a judge, but as well as a coach, of course. So, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Again, I'll stick around, keep answering questions, but I try to keep this at 1 hour max. So you're free to go if you need to.
And that is a great question in the chat there about talking. Absolutely can. That's part of cooperation, right? So you're competing to get the highest score you can get, but you're simultaneously cooperating with the other team so that both of you hopefully can get the highest score you can get. So absolutely, the two teams that are in a match at a given table are not only allowed but encouraged to talk to each other before the match. And try to help each other if they can, if they both have missions for that, to get the best score they can out of that particular mission.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Holly.
Hello, and thank you so much for sending Mr. Riley to my school.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I really appreciate it. It was very helpful. And I would like to know, I forgot this part, that how many students can be at the table for the robot game?
Right. So this has been a change last year. It's new last year. Last year's the first year we did it this way. Up to 4 students are allowed at the table at any particular moment. You are allowed to swap out those 4 students as the match goes on. So you're allowed 2 of them kind of on the, if you will, the left side, what we call, the west side, and then you're allowed 2 over on the east side. Yep.
Okay, very good. And they can both cooperate with each other, like, once it's during that 2.5, they cannot change their position, but then the second round they can go and change it. But
you are allowed to swap out those 4. So if let's say you have a team of 10 members, and you start with 2 on the left and 2 on the right. As the match is going on, the other 6 members can swap in. Our referees just need to see that clearly there's only 2 on the left side and 2 on the right side at any given moment.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, there was an additional question in the chat from Stacy on this about 3 on one side and 1 on the other. Unfortunately, that's not allowed.
No.
So it's got to be, and if you have a really small team, so if you look in the rule book, there definitely give you some examples. Oh, before setup. Well, before setup, yeah, if they're not started yet, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. If they need to help them for some reason, that should be okay. But yeah, just I'll put it this way: they may get a question from the referee of why there's 3 of them there, so they may have to explain to them, we're just here to help, with the setup or whatever, and then we're going to step back. So just be aware the referees will probably be on the lookout for that and may question them on it. But yes, if it's before the match starts, that's fine. But yeah, there are very specific rules, like even for smaller teams of 3 or even 2, how they have to split up. So if it's 2, they got to be 1 on 1. If it's 3, it has to be 2 on one side, 1 on the other. And then of course, once you get to 4 or more, you get to this 2 on each side. And then the other thing to point out, I just want to follow up on Holly's question. Yes, you can substitute in, as Rubo said. Be clear though that just like there's a division between the 2 sides for the drivers, in theory, the spectator, the rest of the team that's cheering, behind them, they have to basically define themselves in 2 sides as well, and they can only swap in on the side that they're on. So, even if I'm not an active driver, I'm standing over the left side, the west side, and I'm cheering my team on, and then the driver says, "Okay, I want to swap with you," and they swap in. I can go up to the board, but I can only go up on the left side, that west side. I can't go over to the other side. So, the team basically is asked to, I guess, kind of stand in such a way that it's relatively clear to the referees, which side, if you're going to swap in, you're going to be swapping in on, and not to cross over. And then I think Holly also used again, sometimes I pick up on phrases, so I apologize, that just making sure they're not being misunderstood. So the idea of the teams can cooperate or whatever, they cannot hand things to each other across the way, so they're supposed to, if they want to send the robot from one side to the other, do that through robot motion, right? There are some rules that provide a few exceptions to that. in terms of if the robot is stranded out on the field, completely outside of both of the launch areas, the team can ask to have it returned to either area. So, again, read the rule book, because there are definitely some rules on that. But in terms of like, if you're thinking cooperation with each other by handing things across, like handing an attachment or handing the robot from one side to the other, they're not supposed to be doing that.
And Angelo's put in there, quoting from the rule book, some of these rules and the page number to reference those too. Good. Are there other questions? Concerns?
This is Kirsten. I'm a first time coach, and I have a lot of questions.
Oh, go for it.
And unfortunately, we just found out today that our teacher from our school is not going to be there at the competition. So I'm going to ask them all of you now. So question regarding, so when they get to the table and they put all of the robot and all of the pieces in one launch area for the pre-inspection 20 points, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then can they move attachments from one launch area to the other launch area prior to the start of the game?
Are you raising your hand to answer that?
Yes, I can answer that. So the equipment inspection, yes, you do put it in one home area, but after you have completed the equipment inspection, you may split up your attachments and place your robot into whichever home you wish. That also includes any of the missions that you start with. So you can see on the slide, you have the audience members, one expert in your home areas. You may also split that as you desire at the beginning.
Okay. And then, so the two people that are at the table on each side, are they supposed to, you mentioned the word driver earlier. What does that mean? And I mean, can they both interact with the robot as much as they need to, or is only one person supposed to be taking on and off attachments? How does that work?
So both, what we call them, driver or technician, are kind of used interchangeably here. So yeah, on one side of the table, both technicians are allowed to be interacting with the robot and the materials around them, as long as they're staying in that kind of launch space area. Once it leaves that launch area, if they touch the robot, they do lose one of their precision tokens. And so as long as it's in there, both students can be working with the robot attachments and any mission models that are within their area. So you can't interact with the ones that are out there, but if you have some of these starting ones over here, you can.
Okay. So when it starts in the, when they start the robot in the launch area, does the entire robot and all attachments have to be inside that red line?
Or the blue one, depending on which side they launch from. But
Yeah,
yes,
sorry.
you have that quarter circle there that you have to fit everything within. Yep.
Okay. And then, so like if they can't position the robot, I'm just looking at the west side, they can't position the robot such that the robot's inside of the white area, but an arm might extend past the red line.
No, it has to be completely inside there. Yep.
Okay. And then sort of, thanks. So also, when the robot comes back to that area, does it have to be completely inside of that white area and before including any appendages prior to them touching the robot?
You're allowed more leeway on returning. You actually have the black space as well to work with.
But
that one, so I would like you, I'm going to refer you to the rule book here, because it's going to be specifics on if there is pushing mission models as well. So you want to be careful about when they grab it. As a general rule of thumb, what I've always coached teams to do is try to drive to that back corner as far as you can. That way you're comfortably in there. But you do know you can go into the black area and use that as an extra space.
Gotcha. And there's no, one of my kids said in previous years, they weren't allowed to leave the mat. They got points off if they left the mat area, or they lost precision tokens. But I think I read that they can go into the black area while they're doing their mission, and that doesn't lose tokens, correct?
Scott, you want to take that one?
I just want to make sure I understand the question. So you're saying, like, if the robot while it's doing a mission, drives into the black area and is completing that mission? Is that the
Yeah, and then
nature
it
of the
goes
question?
back and it goes back onto the mat as
That is
part
no problem at all. So yeah, in terms of the rules, it defines a term called launch, and then essentially an interruption, which is a stoppage of the robot, right? And so from the period where you launch until a robot either returns back to home, like Rubo was just describing, and the team, basically collects it and starts over again to launch another mission, or they interrupt it while it's out on the field. In between those two times, the robot can go anywhere on the mat it wants to complete things. So absolutely, the robot can drive into the black area and still be doing missions, then drive black, so basically into home and then back out of home and do something else and keep doing other things. There's nothing preventing it or restricting it, and there's no requirement that when it returns to home or drives through home or the launch area, that the team has to recover it. And they could just keep their hands off of it and let it keep running as long as it's doing what they want it to do. There's no penalty for that, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I can already, I won't give strategic advice, but I will say that I've already seen a few teams solve some of this year's missions with their robot in the black area, the home area, while they're completing the mission. And then, as you say, go back out on the mat and do something else, and that's perfectly fine. The biggest issue with that is just tell the team, do not put your hands on it, don't touch it, don't stop it. If they interact with it, then that's a problem.
Got it. Okay, moving on. Thank you very much. How does it work, the cooperation, that mission 2 one? Do the teams talk to each other prior to the start? And are the teams, I see in the slides that you showed of the or the pictures of previous tournaments, are the two teams going at the same time on back-to-back tables?
So yes, I'm going to come back to this picture here. So the way we do is we take two of our tables and they're latched together. And so two teams will go simultaneously. They'll start at the same moment. The game announcer will announce a countdown, be 3, 2, 1, Lego, and on that note, they can start running their missions. So the two teams are running simultaneously. Do recognize they're not competing head to head. They're just trying to score the best they can. There is that cooperation mission. Every year there is a cooperation mission. In fact, in the picture I'm showing you right here, this is from last year. The cooperation mission was right in the middle. It was kind of a high five here. So this year there is a strategy where the teams do want to converse with each other. So it would be to their advantage to talk to each other about what their goals or intentions are. And Scott was describing that earlier, where we do want to have our teams working together and communicating, and that's the purpose of those missions. So they're definitely very much welcome to talk to each other pre-match. In fact, as far as I know, there's no reason they can't talk during the match either. They just can't wander over there and physically go to the other side. So, yep.
Okay. So then logistically, right? So this year, the mission, you have to tap the thing X amount of times to make it spin. If the kids get there and they find out that the other team isn't doing that mission, right, and they're going for the highest point value, but they can't code at the table, does that mean they need to load different codes in order to get, if they want to do it have it land on one color ball if the other team's participating versus the other color ball if the team's not participating? Or is there time to go back and pick the code that they load into the robot after talking to the team?
So right, the Spike. So let's assume you're using the Spike Prime, which is the more common version of the Lego robot. You have up to 20 programs you can put into it, and you can run the team can elect to run any of those 20 programs. And so they may have a program that makes it spin once, maybe spins twice, 3 times, whatever, and they can choose on the fly during the match which codes they want to run.
Okay.
As long as it's preloaded, that's the key there. It has to be preloaded on the robot. They can't come to the table with a laptop or tablet and load programs in there. They have to have it preloaded before they get there, but they can choose to run all or none of the missions. That's the choice they make on the fly. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Rubo, can I add that you will be spending a lot of time in the queuing line right next to that team?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a good time to have a conversation with them. And if you're really fast about it, then you could have your laptop right there in the queuing line, as long as it doesn't go to the table with you.
What's the queuing line?
It's just where you're lining up, waiting for the match to begin. We will have the teams waiting in line several matches before their competition, just so that we don't run behind. So, it looks like on your schedule that you have a lot of time between matches, but really some of that time is lost because you're standing in line a few matches ahead of yours.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And just so I've been Googling and YouTubing and foruming as much as I can. The kids can't touch the missions on the table. So if they see something that's not set up correctly, they have to tell the judge, right?
That's the intent. Yeah, they should just ask the referee. They would just ask nice politely, is that set up correctly, or could you check that for us? And that's very much expected. It's encouraged because this is an opportunity for these young kids to find their voice and be able to communicate with strangers. And so we do encourage a polite conversation both pre and post match. So if they feel that the mat isn't set up correctly, they can definitely, well within their rights, to ask for to be fixed and whatnot. Also, before the match starts, what our MC or our game announcer does is they goes around to each team and says, "Are you ready?" And we ask for a thumbs up, and we ask it from the teams, and we ask it from our referees and our scorekeeper, just to make sure everybody's ready to start the match. And so, if there's any last second things on there, they just give us a thumb down and say, "Oh, well, we got to check that mission real quick." Likewise, on the backside of the match, as I was describing, the team will walk through with the referee all the missions to see how they were scored. And if they know that rule book, that what I have shown here on the screen, if they know it well, they can question, again, in a very polite way, why they were scored in a certain way. And if there is a good discussion, they bring in the head referee to help clarify what it is. Our intention, and always is first and foremost, is to have a fun day and to give the kids as much support as they deserve. And so that's really in the forefront. And so we want to make sure that we support them and that they're coming out of this confident and having fun. We don't bend the rules for them, but we make sure to clarify in a good conversation way what's going on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, those are all great questions. I definitely, this rule book here really answers a lot of things for our teams. So definitely make sure you've gone through it a couple of times. Yeah. About art piece and pedestals and ISOs.
Yeah, I just want to say there was some questions before, about the mission 4, basically the masterpiece with regards to pedestal and things like that. Stacy, I've clarified a bit, and I see you saw that. Nanami's answer was 100% correct, but I just want to make sure it doesn't get overinterpreted and the basis of why she gave that answer. And so it really does, I would say, behoove you to make a very careful reading of that scoring criteria, and then if there's any additional requirements, which is that blue text. So there's basically the bullet points, which is the scoring criteria, and then below that there's potentially that blue italicized text, which provides any additional requirements that might be there. And so just read that carefully, and like I say, if you read through it carefully, that's pretty much what the referees are going to do, is if they're trying to decide if something scores or doesn't score, and what issues might be created. With regards to Suzanne's question, which is about this idea of attaching, first of all, because I've already gotten some questions about this via email, and a lot of them come from videos that they've seen online. Just be careful. Just a video you saw may or may not be legal just because the team says, "Hey, we scored it, we did it." There's no referee there. Also, bear in mind, there is a rule book, but referees are human, and their interpretation, including the head referees at that event, might be slightly different. So if you're doing a strategy that is at least questionable, just bear in mind that it might go either way for you, depending on who the head referee is and how they're interpreting that. But there definitely is wording on that, and earlier in the chat, and I'll mention it again here, but I believe it's on, is it page 20 in the rule book? Yeah. So on page 20, which is the outside home rules during the match, there's some very wording specific to the idea of, can you combine mission models? Can you attach your equipment to a mission model? Things of that nature. And so I would just make sure you read over that. I think Nanami, just quoted it and put it in there. So just read over that wording carefully to make sure that whatever side of that gray area you think you're on in terms of the way the rules worded, that your team members would be able to successfully, I guess, convince a referee that they've met that requirement. although I guess I'll just add on real quickly. So one of the ones that seems to come up, any sort of attachment, I think that involves using the studs, that's probably not going to meet that rule number 4 there, part 4 on page 20. At that point, you're no longer simple or loose. Actually, by definition, it's not loose because that's the whole point of Legos is they attach together with the studs and they stick together. So that's not loose. So yeah, some of the ones I've seen online, I guess I'll put it this way: if I were the head referee at that particular event, I wouldn't let that go. Maybe some other head referee would. I wouldn't know. But yeah, to me, it would not meet that simple and loose criteria. Some of the ways I've seen teams try to combine it and then demonstrate, I guess, through videos online.
Okay. Jay, did you want to ask a question?
No, I just wanted to point out that Miss Mango's hand has been raised.
Yeah.
I don't know if, okay.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. My question is, can the technicians run the same mission within that 2.5 minutes twice? For example, if they are trying to complete mission 7, let's say, and it doesn't make it, but it does travel back into the launch/home area, could they then attempt that same one, maybe right away?
Yeah, and that is completely in their power. They can do really anything within the rulebook in the 2.5 minutes, and it might be the robot sits in the corner the entire 2.5 minutes. They just do one mission over and over and over to get it to actually score. That's it's part of their decision process they get to make at the table. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good. A lot of great questions. Good.
I have more, but I didn't want to monopolize.
You want to fire off? I'm sure it's one of those things. If you have that question, most everybody else does too. So
Well, so they mentioned in the rule book about being allowed to have a piece of notebook paper in there. And how strict are we? Is it really notebook paper, or is it just an 8.5 by 11? We can have pictures and typed text on, or is it really like handwritten notes kind of thing?
Scott, I'll let you answer that one.
Sure. So yeah, it's basically notebook was meant to mean an approximately, well, I shouldn't say approximately, 8.5 by 11 or less. I guess some notebook papers, what is it, 8 by 10 or whatever, in some of those spiral notebooks or whatever. Yeah, but something smaller, the same size or smaller than a typical piece of notebook paper, which is again 8.5 by 11, at least here in the United States. And I think, as far as I know, there's no restrictions on what they can put on it, whether it's typed or whether they draw pictures versus write text. I don't think there's any additional restrictions about front and back. And I believe they have clarified that you are now allowed to, they said one piece, and then I think someone pointed out, well, but hey, we've got 2 home bases now, 2 launch areas, 2 technician teams, I guess, one on the east side, one on the west side. And I believe they have clarified, I can try to check that in real time for you here, but I believe they've clarified that you can have 2, basically one at each home area. Yeah. That's
what I saw, is you could have 1 in each home area.
Right.
Yeah. My next question was, can it be double-sided? So thank you.
As far as I know, again, we read that page again, but I don't think there's any text that says anything about, again, what they can put on it and using both sides of the sheet of paper.
Okay, thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but all jigs have to be made out of Lego. That's correct.
Absolutely, yes. That goes back to the, and actually, this is helpful, Kirsten, because it's on the same page that the rule comes from. So yeah, the rule about the notebook paper is on page 17, which is the equipment page, and that also applies to what we were just talking about the jig. So it's very clear on that page that everything you bring to the competition field, I guess the table or the match, whatever you want to call it, that has to all be Lego. All the equipment, all the team equipment has to be Lego. And the jig is part of the equipment. Even if it's never launched out on the field, it's still part of the team's equipment. So yes, you can build a jig. You're allowed to have a jig, but it does have to be made of Legos. Again, since this question comes up quite a bit, I'll just answer it. People ask, can the jig extend into home area, right? So the jig is not launching. It's not part of the robot. It's not going out onto the field. As Ruba already said earlier today, in that white quarter circle, right, whether it's the left side or right side, the robot, any equipment, so like, attachments and cargo, that would be, things that you're trying to move, mission models, things like that, you're trying to push out onto the field. All of that has to be in the white area. The jig, however, because it is not leaving the launch area and not going out in the field, first has clarified that that can extend back to that east or west wall, so back into the black area on the left or right side. So if that's a question that you have, there you go. Just bear in mind, though, the walls themselves and the space above the walls, that does not count as home or launch area. So extending over the back wall, the south wall, towards the technicians, or over the, I guess, west or east walls, that is not okay, because that's not considered part of home or launch area.
So what I'm hearing is this year we introduced an innovation project coaches clinic. Next year we need to introduce a robot game coaches clinic.
I will admit I came in really late into this and just found a whole bunch of stuff in the last 2 weeks. So
I appreciate,
including the fact that you guys held these. I didn't know you guys had been holding these meetings all season.
well, I appreciate your willingness and to jump in and do that. And the kids are going to appreciate it so much. And the day, it's hard to, the day is so much different than practice, the event, and you're going to have so much fun there. And if you do go to this website, this Google Drive, we do have all of our resources there to go backtrack into our prior meetings.
Yep. I've watched those. I did have one. I remembered one more question. You guys said that you were going to, in the info packet, that the pedestals are going to be at the tables, right? We don't bring those from home. But on the practice tables, will there also be the pedestals there?
So that is a good question. I haven't had a chance to talk to Jenny about this yet. I know we had a talk today a little bit about it because this year's missions they're different than the prior years. The prior years, the majority of the missions are dual lock to the map with a few minor exceptions. This year, a lot of the scoring elements, you have to push and move around. So normally during the practice tables, we don't have those unattached parts left out because they tend to walk away. This year, we had talked about maybe having them because we're going to have a volunteer attendant at the table. Basically, you have to ask for them from them. But Jenny, this is something we were just discussing this morning, and I don't know what the final thoughts are from you about how you want to do this. But the thought is there's so many scoring elements this year that maybe we have a volunteer attendee watch those mission models you have to check them out from.
I'll have to check with, I think for SECTA, we're definitely covered on volunteers that we could make that happen. I'd have to double check with Aki in Northern Nevada to make sure that we have enough volunteers. I think, Kirsten, to be safe, go ahead and bring your own. And I'll send out an update to teams tomorrow.
Our issue is our mat we share with another team, and the other team used the pedestal to make their art piece. We've been kind of, it would be nice to know if it works.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's something that we'll consider when we're planning it out. And like I said, I'll send out an email tomorrow so that you're not left in the dark wondering.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
I think that's all I have.
Well, those are all great questions. Are any last ones? Last call? Well, hearing none, we'll call it evening. I want to thank everyone for coming out and asking wonderful questions. And can't wait to see you in the coming days, weeks, at a tournament throughout the state. And do make sure to stop by and say hi. And good luck to this coming up soon. Good night, everyone.